Welcome to the College Football Preview Show. A day early. We're usually coming to you on Wednesday nights, but for this 1 week this season, we're coming to you on a Tuesday night. We are sponsored by Yolked. I'm your host, John Sarianides, and as always, I'm joined by our lead college football writer and my partner on the College Football Preview Show, Ryan Barry. Ryan, how are you this evening?
Doing pretty well. Appreciate your schedule accommodation, John, as always. Excited to be here, even though it was a pretty tough weekend across New England for college football until we were rescued last night.
Yes, it was indeed. And before we get started and we talk about the weekend that was, and then we look ahead to week two, I do want to remind you that Yolked is one of the best protein products on the market. If you're looking for a safe, effective protein product for yourself to help enhance your workouts or to help your team as a coach, Yolked is the product for you. It's made out of egg. It's only 47 calories. It's a delicious tasting product, and you get that added protein to enhance your workouts. Visit yoke.com today for special offers and deals, especially for teams, but to also explore the product again. I've used it in the past, and I can't say enough good things about it. It is fantastic. It's also a great snack. If you're somebody who knows you're going to go work out after work and you need kind of that bridge snack before your workout, then have a packet of Yolk. Like I said, 47 calories. Go get your workout, and you will feel a lot better, and you'll get more out of your workouts because of this safe and effective product. Again, visit yoke.com today. All right, Ryan, we're going to start off with what was a special night last night for Boston College football fans. Kevin Stone and I just talked about it on the New England Football Show. We're going to talk about it here. I want to get your thoughts on BC's 28-13 win. Now, look, I'll say this. I think it's a big win for this program. I think it's probably their best win in the last 10 years. It's their best win at least since that USC win at home on Saturday Night Football in 2014. They've had some other good wins the last 30 years, of course, 93 out at Notre Dame. They had some big wins in 07. But certainly, this is a big win for Bill O'Brien and this new coaching staff. Great way to kick off his tenure at Boston College. They dominated Florida State from start to finish. The game wasn't even as close as the score would indicate. They were disciplined, they were physical, and they played a brand of football that we're used to seeing Boston College play when they're good around here. You couldn't help but be impressed by this win. A great way to start the Bill O'Brien era at the Heights.
I think maybe it's the perception and of it, but just seeing O'Brien on the sideline, it felt like BC was legitimate. I don't know if that makes any sense. Like, obviously the hire is big and he's around and he's at practice and you interact with him. But then when you see him out there, like, oh yeah, this is a big time coach. Like he doesn't. What I saw was confidence. What I saw was like a kind of swagger that BC hadn't had in a while. And I think that like him being there is a humongous element of that. To take basically what's a lot of the same team as last year and just have them run out there and beat the 10th ranked team in the country, I thought was impressive. Of course, all credit to the players, but I think so much of that, just seeing O'Brien out there, like in my crazy brain, I was always like, man, BC, should they lock him up now, give him an extension? Like, and I know that sounds crazy, but I was just like, it was so cool to see him out here in this region and coaching and doing it on such a national stage where everyone's now talking about it on local radio stations. I had a lot of my friends messaging me about it. Like, hey, you watching this BC game? It's like, yeah, this is pretty great, right? From people that hadn't even thought of BC in years, right? They probably only know about Matt Ryan if you really asked them, right? So I was really impressed with Castellanos. I was really impressed with Kai Robichaux. I think that it was great for the region, and I'm really happy for the program. No matter what Florida State's been through in week one and last year, it's still a huge win that you got on the road, in Florida.
Right. Against a quality ACC opponent, which,
right.
Let's face it, when you think of the ACC in the last X number of years, the conversation always starts with Florida State or Clemson.
Right.
They've been one of the two standard bearer programs. So I think that makes it even more impressive that they were able to go down there and beat a program of the caliber of Florida State. Now, I will say this. I don't think, and I'm not trying to take anything away from BC's win, I don't think Florida State's very good. I think what you saw last night is what they are. Defensively, they're very generous against the run. BC averaged over 5 yards a carry. DJ Uiagalelei is who we thought he was. He's not the guy we saw last year at Oregon State. He's more like the guy we saw a couple of years ago at Clemson. He's reverted back to that. I don't think that they spent their money wisely in terms of using money to bring in these transfers in the portal. I think that they brought in a lot of guys that came in from marquee programs, but they didn't produce at those programs, and it doesn't seem like they're really going to be producing at Florida State either. So I'm not trying to take anything away from this BC win, but that's not a good Florida State team. That they're going to struggle to end up bowl eligible. They have a tough schedule. All of that being said, you still have to be impressed with how disciplined and dominant Boston College was. And in many ways, Ryan, it's a signature hang your hat kind of win for this program. Now, look, they're 2-0. They play Duquesne Saturday at 3:30 at the Heights. They're going to whack Duquesne. They're 2-0. It's more about looking ahead to that Missouri game in a couple of weeks out there, and then when they come back home for that Saturday night game on September 21st against Michigan State, that, of course, will be the red bandana game. I think those two games will be more of a measuring stick of what this football team is going to be the rest of the year. Now, if somehow they find their way out of this 4-game stretch, 3-1, 4-0, they're in pretty good position now to not only make a run for an ACC title, but possibly also be a playoff team. So, I think that this win is going to serve as a springboard. They're going to take care of business this week. They may start flat because it's Duquesne and they're coming off the high of winning in Tallahassee, but they're still going to win. It's going to be about that Missouri and Michigan State game. If they come out and win those two games, this program is legitimate. Now, I will say this, and I did this on the New England Football Show. I want to throw some cold water on this, the excitement of Boston College. And the reason I say it is all of a sudden, it's great to see the alumni coming out and celebrating the big win and enjoying it on social media. But all of a sudden now you start to see people come out of the woodwork with these BC accounts, and they're big BC fans, and BC this and BC that. We're going to win a natty. And listen, I love it. I love hearing that because at times I felt like ever since we've been in business, the only people that talk, for lack of a better term, nonsense like that are typically UMass and UConn folks, and we love our UMass and UConn folks, but we know how passionate they are. It's nice to finally see that passion from the Boston College crowd, but let's pump the brakes on, this being the tone setter for what is going to be a championship year and a playoff run. Let's take it week to week. Bill O'Brien said the same thing. I'm not telling you or anybody else something that Bill O'Brien wouldn't tell you if you talk to him one-on-one privately off the record. He would tell you the same thing. It's one win. It's nice to get it, but we got to move on.
Yeah, and I do think the win helps legitimize last year's close loss too in some ways. I think maybe some people might have thought, it was a fluke. Yeah, they only lost by 2, but this year, so no, we hung with them because we were good enough to hang with them, and like you said, I get my UMass background may make it seem like I would always want to put cold water on it, but I do agree in the sense that it's game one. We need to see it until we believe it, because this is a program that for a number of years has won a big game and then come out flat. And I don't think that's going to be Duquesne, but how are they going to be against Western Kentucky? How are they going to, is that going to be closer than it should? I mean, are they going to beat Michigan State, right? Those are the games where if I'm a BC fan, I feel a lot better, because you look at the schedule and you look at the ACC, Virginia Tech lost, Clemson looked terrible. I mean, Florida State's looked bad these last 2 weeks.
It wasn't a good week for the ACC.
No, it's kind of open season. So if you could just kind of fly under the radar, like you said, I don't think it's crazy to think that they could be kind of hanging there by the end of the year. UNC is not who they were in the past. So yeah, definitely be excited. In my opinion, here's the big thing. Like you said, show up this weekend. That is, to me, that'll say a lot about the fans and how much they care, because how many times have we seen these early games, especially against FCS teams, when no one comes to the Heights and it's just when they play Maine, UNH, it's dead there. But if there's actually fanfare, they better be there this Saturday to be like, we don't care who we're playing, we're pumped for this program again. So that's the hope. If I'm an Eagles fan.
I think that's a tremendous point, Ryan. They need to show up on Saturday. Yeah. I don't care that it's Duquesne. We know they're going to show up for the red bandana game. I'm not worried about that primetime game. The game means so much to the Boston College football and the football community at large here in New England. But show up this Saturday. It's a 3:30 game, which I don't understand why they're playing it at 3:30. But
never makes sense.
It's a 3:30 game. But show up. They should fill the joint this Saturday. I don't care that it's Duquesne. If the level of excitement for this program is what we think it is, then there's no excuse for them not to be pushing 40,000 on Saturday against Duquesne. And because again, that's going to show Bill O'Brien and his players that we as a fan base are invested in you. We believe that this could be a special season. We believe that you could do more than what you're doing right now. So certainly it'll be interesting to see what kind of crowd they get there. All right. Saturday, of course, you were at UMass to cover the Minutemen and their season opener. They ended up losing to Eastern Michigan 28-14. And same old song and dance here, Ryan. Get off to a slow start, couple penalties, fall behind early, give up a couple big plays early. They're hanging around, but they just didn't seem like they had enough to make that final push to tie the game and possibly win it in overtime. Eastern Michigan prevails. Now UMass on Saturday has to travel to Toledo to take on a very good Rockets team. Toledo, of course, plays at the Glass Bowl. Jason Candle, one of the best coaches in the MAC. That's going to be a tough matchup for him. But before we look ahead to that, you were there on Saturday. You covered the game for New England Football Journal. Just some thoughts on what you saw, and does this look to you like it's going to be another typical UMass football season in terms of what we've seen in recent years?
I didn't think so coming into Saturday. I had a lot of friends messaging me asking, how they thought it was going to go. I had friends saying, "Hey, do you want to get in on this bet? I'm putting $5 on the money line." I had so many people expressing so much interest. So I think the fact that it went the way it went was really, it was just so deflating, because you're always waiting for the shoe to turn, to be like, oh, it's different. And because I know that feeling, right? I know that feeling like inside, like as a fan, like when you're watching the game and you're watching the program and you're just like, is it going to be the same? Oh, it is, right? And like, because it's always there, and you were hoping that Saturday it wouldn't feel that way and that you would maybe finally feel a little different. And what I understand that on the first drive that Eastern Michigan scored, there was a pass interference that extended the play, right? And that extended the drive, and that kind of helped. But Cole Snyder, the Eagles quarterback, I don't want to say he picked them apart, because he didn't, but he was great all afternoon. He made the throws he needed to. He was always confident in the pocket. He never faced any pressure, 0 sacks, basically no QB hurries, right? He always had as much time as he wanted. And that was what was disappointing, because that's supposed to be the strong suit of this team, is the secondary, right? And I will say the run game improved. The run defense improved. That was awesome to see. It wasn't until the end of the game where Eastern Michigan really started picking up some more yards. I think it was just offensively to see how little time Fumichan had to throw, how when he did have time to throw, how kind of hurried he looks in the pocket. And, he'd made some really nice throws. He had a great slant over the middle to new wide receiver Sterling Galvin. I mean, they're without Frank Ladson, the transfer they got, who's supposed to be very talented this year. But it was just kind of shocking, because it looked like they were playing a Toledo, or a Liberty. And I think that's what was so striking to me. That's just like, they just never could get past, the 50 or the 45 of the Eagles. And it just, the 2 kicks missing. It was just like, I think it was more the same song and dance of, we're frustrated. This is tough. But I think a lot of it was just kind of anger, like, seriously, like that we didn't see any improvement after this offseason, after these transitions. And I have a theory on a lot of transfers, just kind of in general, I can share later on. But it was just so disappointing, just from the fanfare there was around that game, the packed student section, and to see them all funneling out by halftime was just like, it's the same thing. It's just banging your head against the wall, and it's not changing, and it's not going to get any better with Toledo this weekend, which is not great either. So
no, and it's disappointing too, because I think going into this season, year 3 is usually the big year when it comes to turnarounds, program turnarounds, because that's the year you're supposed to show the most progress.
Right.
Year 3, and then year 4 is the year you really take that step and you start to achieve some of your long-term goals or your bigger goals. And based on what we're seeing so far, it doesn't look like that progress is there. It doesn't look like we're going to see and it's only one game, so I don't want to be dramatic here, but it doesn't appear like we're going to see that progress we were hoping that we were going to see out of UMass this season. And it's disappointing to hear that they couldn't protect Fumichan most of the time, because that's a veteran group coming back. You got Josh Atwood, Ethan Modinger, I mean, you got guys that have been in this program the last 2 and 3 years, and they've started and they have plenty of experience. So it's really disappointing to see that they couldn't consistently protect him, that he was harassed at times in the pocket, that he didn't have the time he needed to go through his progression and deliver the ball on time. The running game, we knew coming into this season, was going to take some time to get going. It was going to be a committee approach. And you mentioned Frank Gatson, which obviously the former Miami transfer is that's a big piece to be missing, because he now balances things out to where defenses can't focus just on Anthony Simpson. But I think that this is a program that, again, we're kind of in the same place we were a year ago, where they're going to be okay at times offensively. I think the bigger concern, if I'm a UMass fan, is the defense. Defense has really regressed the last 2 years. You want to see improvement. We know who Don Brown is as a defensive coach. We know what he can do schematically, but it's got to start to show up on the field, Ryan. We haven't seen it. They were not good on defense last year, and it's kind of trending in that same direction, albeit it's very early this season. So you need a lot of positives on Saturday in this Toledo game if you're a UMass fan.
Yeah, I mean, I talked last week about how, like, there's no more moral losses, right? Like, but I would have taken a moral loss on Saturday. If they had lost 31-27, I'd be like, all right, at least they were in it. If I would have known this was the alternative. And I think we knew that there was a smaller defensive line coming into this season and that they were going to struggle to get pressure. But, I mean, it was non-existent on Saturday. And if it's like, well, man, if this is against Eastern Michigan, like, what's it going to look like when you've got, a lot more
Missouri and Georgia,
right? Stiff competition coming in. So I think that's there. Yeah, there just wasn't that thing like last year where you're like, okay, like, but Kieran Lynch-Adams is good, there wasn't really that showed up the other day. I mean, I will say I put it in my my little segment I want to try doing, the Sunday tea, right, with UMass, right, like little tea time thing, like we're in England or something, and it's like Fumachan looked great running. But that was partially because he never had his feet set and he was running for his life half the time. There was a couple really nice QB design runs. He looked good, and that was encouraging to see, right? But he had a huge pickup in the end of the game because he was running for his life, right? So it's like, we'll see this weekend. It's not the pick-me-up game you need, because Toledo are a very, very, very good program.
Yeah. No, I agree. And, of course, we're going to look back on the weekend that was, and it was a tough weekend for the Division I programs in New England. Make no mistake about it. I mean, BC aside, a lot of the other programs in the region had lopsided losses. One of those, of course, was UConn's 50-7 loss to Maryland. And I honestly, Ryan, I can't figure out this football program right now. Mm-hmm. I really can't. I mean, I look, I said this to a UConn alumnus today. I talked to UConn football with him for about 20 minutes, and I said to him, I think Jim Mora is the right guy for the job. I think they did everything they needed to do this offseason to take another step forward and to be more of what we saw from them 2 years ago, as opposed to the 3-9 team we saw last year. That's not the case. Maryland is a good football team. Don't get me wrong. Mike Loxley, terrific coach. They've recruited well. They have a death grip on the DMV. They get a lot of talent in their own backyard to commit to Maryland. They've done a really good job in the portal. But all of that being said, UConn could not lose this game the way they did this weekend. And yet here we are. They go down there. They get a 50-burger hung on them. Nick Evers gets hurt, the Wisconsin transfer making his first career start. Joe Fagnano comes in. He does throw a touchdown pass. But, I mean, again, this was the year that UConn was supposed to bounce back. You have 8 home games, 6 in a row at one point. Everything was lined up for them to turn this thing around. But after what we saw Saturday, it looks like it has the potential, even though it's early, to be another long year in stores.
Yeah, and even though Evers got hurt, 6 of 17, 73 yards and a pick, it's not like he was lighting up beforehand. Victor Rosa had a hard time getting going. Cameron Edwards didn't really run the ball too well. And, so I think it was just surprising, especially considering that Maryland wasn't really sure who their starting quarterback was going to be this season, right? It was a pretty open camp all summer, and then they step right in and drop, almost, 350 plus yards on him. And I think that for me is what was really kind of telling, right? All 3 quarterbacks played. Billy Edwards Jr. was awesome, 311 yards, 2 touchdowns. And So it's kind of the thing where I think you and I both were very like, oh, I think that they can cover. I think they could keep this game semi-close. I thought the score would be something like 28, 31-14, which I think would have been semi-respectable. But
Right.
I was shocked when I saw the score because I was keeping tabs of the game and I was, yeah. So, it's one of those things where, like you said, I do also agree. I think Jim Moore is the right guy to coach his program. I think he's in a good spot. I think that they invest in NIL. Like, I think that there's involvement in the state, which is huge. But I just, to go out like that, I think is super disappointing against a team. Like you said, I know that Maryland's a solid program, but they shouldn't be letting out 50 points against them.
No. And that's just it. I think ultimately what it comes down to is that's a very good program. But like you said, it's a much different conversation if they come out of this thing. Even if they lost, let's say they lost 31-21, conversation's totally different now. Instead, they get whacked, quarterback gets hurt. Now there's questions about the quarterback position again.
Mm-hmm.
I know a lot of UConn fans are clamoring for more Cole Welliver. They want to see the true freshman from Liberty Christian. So, I don't know if we're going to get that right now. We could as the season goes on, but you've got to flush this one out of your system now. You got Merrimack coming in on Saturday. They're coming off an impressive performance where they lost to Air Force out there 21-6, but played well enough to potentially win the game. They proved that they can hang with FBS programs. They have the talent, even though they lost starting quarterback Gavin McCusker. They have the talent to hang. So if you're UConn, you gotta come back now, bounce back at home against an opponent that you're better than. You've got to bounce back and take care of business this week if you're the Huskies. I do really quickly want to talk about some of the other games in the area before we shift gears to our picks for this week. Hell of a game on Saturday night down at Meade Stadium. Artoni Catalina was there to watch URI beat Holy Cross 20-17 and what could end up being the game of the year. I mean, it was a fantastic game from start to finish. Big win for URI. I mean, they go to Minnesota this week, so it could be short-lived momentum potentially. But is this the big signature win that Jim Fleming and his team needed?
It's hard to argue it's not. I mean, I feel like, in some ways maybe they would have loved to have gotten this Crusaders team and gotten this win, when Bob Chesney was there. But it's at home, and I know there's a lot of those bits that you could say that were favoring the Rams, but it's still an impressive win. I mean, Devin Farrell looked awesome, and he was the leading rusher, 287 passing yards, and
CAA Offensive Player of the Week.
Yeah, I don't know how you don't feel good about it if you're a Rams fan. You're probably thinking this is what we want to see. These are the type of wins that make us feel good, and it's kind of like in some ways reminds me of the BC win where you're like, oh, okay, this is legit. Like, this is the stuff you need to show me to make me feel bought in. So definitely frustrating if you're the Crusaders, especially now you're thinking, oh man, like maybe some people thought this was going to be a win, and you look at how challenging your schedule is this year with all this turnover, a new coach, your mind might start to wonder, oh man, are we going to, how's the season going to go now, right? But if you're the Rams, I actually would love to be playing Minnesota this week if that's my FBS team I have to take on, right? We can get to that in the preview, but I'm really happy for the Rams. I think the Crusaders should still be happy. It's not like they got blown out. 3-point loss. Great game, right? Came down to the end there. So, but appreciative as a New England college football fan that it was such a good game and these two schools did play each other.
Yeah, no, I agree. And for Holy Cross, look, they trailed most of the game, made a late fourth quarter comeback. Again, Holy Cross has been the standard bearer program in this market now for the last 4 years. So I'm not going to sit here and say if you're Dan Curran, that was a moral victory watching the kids come back. You're Holy Cross.
Right.
It's not, there are no moral victories when you're a program that has had the kind of success they've had in recent years. But you bring up a good point. Their schedule is tough. They got UNH on Saturday. You're going to be there, of course. It's not, it's not like you have a game now where you can use that as kind of a bounce back and then get this thing back on track. You've got a tough slate of games coming up. I mean, you've got UNH, you've got Yale. I mean, it's not easy for Holy Cross. This could be a tough game to bounce back from just simply because they're playing such a good schedule.
Right. I might have froze here. Am I with you?
Yeah, I can hear you, but you're not moving.
Okay, let's see what happened there. That's the worst. I mean, that's the absolute worst spot I could have stopped on. So let me try and rejoin. Of course. But yeah, definitely not ideal, but really excited for where the Rams are going this season.
Yeah, and again, like I said, you're going to be there on Saturday for UNH Holy Cross. Must win for both teams. All of a sudden now, both teams need this win. You don't want to fall to 0-2. That's an early hole you don't want to have to start worrying about digging out of. And of course, UNH had a tough loss on Thursday night at Central Florida. Wildcats hung in there for a little bit, and then all of a sudden, Central Florida's talent took over, and they took the game over and ended up beating UNH. But for UNH, this week is big. I mean, this is not Holy Cross isn't rebuilding. I mean, you still have plenty of talent back from the Patriot League championship teams of the last few years, but certainly there's some areas of this Holy Cross program that are not as strong as they've been in recent years. So I suspect that this will be a pretty good game between two teams that played each other in the playoffs a couple of years ago in a rainstorm where Holy Cross prevailed. But it's also two really good friends in Dan Kern and Ricky Santos. I think this will be a hell of a matchup. And of course, as I mentioned, Ryan, you're going to be there for that one on Saturday.
Yeah, I'm still here. I'm so sorry people have to look at this horrible.
No, you know what? We can hear your voice. That's okay. That's all that matters.
All right. Yeah, I'm so excited for that. I remember, I know that I do the UMass home games, but I, selfishly was like, man, would love to get to that UNH Holy Cross game. So I'm pretty excited and appreciate you guys for that. And I think that it was a tough loss for Wildcats. They hung in it, like you said, for a little bit. And, I thought what was still excellent to see was how great Logan Tomlinson looked. I still think despite, the difficult circumstances, a hot, wet, night in Florida, he came out, had a great game. And if I'm a Wildcat fan, I'm excited about that, and we'll see where the run game goes. But I think that this is a better opportunity for them to kind of show what they can do. If I'm the Wildcats, I feel a lot better coming in than when Holy Cross is coming in right now, if I had to compare the feeling between the two.
Yeah. Even though they gave up 57 points, I agree. I would feel better if I were UNH just because Holy Cross is coming off a tough loss. Yeah, they're at home. But certainly for UNH, again, both of these programs lost a lot of talent from last year's team. I mean, just the quarterback talent alone. Max Brosmer's at Minnesota now. Matthew Sluka's at UNLV, and he led them to a win over Houston over the weekend. I mean, just the quarterback talent alone tells you how much both programs lost in terms of good players that are no longer there. I suspect this will be a pretty good game. I'm going to break it down here in a couple minutes, but it's a must-win for both. Central Connecticut State started off playing pretty well, pretty competitive against Central Michigan, and the wheels fell off. They ended up giving up 66 points in a loss. They're going to host Fordham on Saturday night down in a root field on the campus of Central Connecticut State University. Bryant loses to Delaware 48-17. Delaware got off to a fast start. Bulldogs unfortunately kept up early, but then Delaware was able to pull away in the second half there. And Ryan, for Bryant, it's really, when I talked to Chris Merritt this summer when I did my camp visit, so much of it was about, look, we got a lot of new faces, and we got to find a way to acclimate those faces and get them on the same page. And you had mentioned to me that's kind of sort of where UMass is also, in terms of they had a lot of new faces and they felt that they struggled on Saturday trying to get those guys acclimated. But it appears that's going to be a common theme this season, where you're going to have a lot of new faces in the 16 Division I programs in the region, and it's going to take some time to get them all up to speed.
Yeah, and I think that, like you had said last week when we previewed this game, that where Delaware was coming into this game, they were coming in a great spot. They were coming in like with some of their best talent they've had in a long time, right? So I think that it's not ideal, of course, to lose in that manner, but I think almost kind of having the pressure off you to all right, you took your licks in that game, but you had a lot of different guys get in. You had Fabrice McKendy carry the ball, Dylan, Kedzier carry the ball. You had a lot of different guys get a chance to get some looks and kind of see what you can work with. The ball was really spread out. I got to give, credit to, Jared Guest. There was, 8+ guys with at least one catch, and I think that's a pretty solid thing as well. So there's definitely more positives to build on it, but it's like we talked about, it's going to be a transition year. Franklin Pierce coming up this weekend, an even better chance to be able to get to do that. So, not the best start to the year, but again, you look around at some of your CEA, and fellow New England, FCS teams, it's a lot better of a game than many others came into, like the Central Connecticut State one, that's for sure.
Yeah, and of course, speaking of the CAA, Maine won their season opener 17-14 over Colgate at home. Big win for Jordan Stevens' squad. Congratulations to them. Defense came up big when they needed them in the second half. And again, look, baby steps to this program, right? There's talent there. Offensively, they have the potential to be pretty good. They have a tough matchup this week at Montana State, who's an FCS power. But if you're Jordan Stevens, you have to be happy with the way your team played on Friday night. Colgate is a good football program. They finished last season 6-1 in their last 7 games. This is a nice win. Don't let people tell you otherwise.
Yeah, I mean, Colgate was picked 4th in the Patriot League. It's not like they were picked, at the bottom. Like, they're a team that people think are going to be competitive. Like you said, they had a great end of last season. And I think what was important for Maine, they really struggled in the run game last year. And Jahari Martin, 15 carries, 66 yards, and a touchdown is pretty solid considering, all things considered last year. I mean, Montego Moss was great. And, just seeing the highlights of the game, there was a good amount of people in the stands. It looked like there was a lot of people who were excited about it. And I think if you're Maine, you look at across the CAA and there's a lot of vulnerable teams and you're like, hey, we were picked towards the bottom half, but this is a huge win to say that, hey, we're actually a lot better than a lot of y'all might think. And last year they played Montana State. It didn't go so well for them. If they come out this week and hang with them a little bit more, and especially do a little bit better offensively than last year, you've got to be feeling good about your season at that point. You get Merrimack on deck soon after that. You've got some winnable games coming up where they could just, a 5-6 season, I think, would be huge for Maine this year. And I think that a win on Friday night helps set that like, we're getting back, right? Where, Coach Stevens wants to have them where he knows they can be. And I think this is how you start and do it.
Yeah. No, I agree wholeheartedly. And I think that, like I said, this is kind of a jumping off point. Now, they do have to go to Montana State this week. They do play Oklahoma later on this year. But, again, if you're Jordan Stevens, you're in the process of rebuilding your alma mater. It's going to take time. A win like this to start off the season, I believe it was their first win on opening day since 2018, maybe. So it's been a while. So certainly this is a program that, needs that boost. And I think beating your opponent week 1 certainly will give you that boost. You are watching the College Football Preview Show, sponsored by Yolked. I'm your host, John Sarianides. As always, I'm joined by my partner, Ryan Barry, who is with us, even though that's a still photo of him on the screen. He is with us in terms of his audio. His audio is working. So in the end, that is all that matters. Real quick, Ryan, Sacred Heart, tough loss at Delaware State. They bounced back this week, hosting Division II St. A's at home on Saturday. As I mentioned, CCSU, tough 66-10 loss to Central Michigan. They'll hope to bounce back. They have Fordham this week at home. Tough schedule. Adam Lechtenberg scheduled up for the Blue Devils this year. And as you mentioned, there are several other games locally. You mentioned Brian Franklin Pierce. You also mentioned, we've talked about UNH Holy Cross. So plenty of local games to attend. Of course, Ivy Leagues don't kick off for another couple of weeks. They don't open the season until Saturday, September 21st. I do want to look ahead here now to week 2 and talk about the games that we're going to see this week. And what we're going to do here, and we did this all last season, Ryan, is we basically, if it's a game that has an actual spread, we use the actual spread. If it's a game that does not have a spread, we make up the spread. Is that fair? Should we do the same thing this season?
Absolutely. We don't need Vegas when we have it right here in Massachusetts. So let's do it.
Yeah. We don't have Vegas when we have it here in Massachusetts. I like it. I like your positivity.
Yeah.
All right. So let's start our preview off with BC Duquesne. Of course, like we talked about, the open the show, Boston College with an impressive 28-13 win over Florida State last night down in Tallahassee in the heat and humidity. They come back home for a 3:30 matchup against Duquesne. I mean, look, Boston College, after last night, you'd have to think that they're going to be heavily favored in this one. They should take care of business. They should cover. That shouldn't be an issue. I mean, we don't have a line on that game right now, but, I mean, it doesn't matter. I think at the end of the day, Boston College should win handily. And if there ends up being a line, they should cover.
Yeah, I mean, I think if it's, I would take them if it's 3 touchdowns, right? I mean, the Dukes lost by 39 last week to Toledo. In Toledo, it was the Dukes are one of the better teams within the NEC. I mean, so I believe they were the preseason favorite, but I don't think that bodes well for a team against BC. So if it's a 3 touchdown favorite, even 3.5, I'll take it. But yeah, definitely a good win, and that again, fans should get out for. If you're serious about this program, then have a good time on Saturday, no matter what the weather's supposed to look like.
Yeah, get out there and support them. Show them that you're going to get behind them no matter who the opponent is. Boston College should cover regardless of the spread. Again, this is they're 2-0 at this point. This is a game that they are going to win, not should win. Next up, we have Minnesota at Rhode Island, at Minnesota. No line on this game either, but if you were a bet man, you'd have to think that the spread would probably be around 17. Is that fair?
Yeah, I would say so. You might be, you might see some juice it up, maybe 18.5, or something like that. Maybe like closer to 3 touchdowns, depending if it gets closer. But like I said, if I'm URI, I worked on a piece for y'all this last week, and it was actually a lot of fun. Making like a menu of your best college football games in New England, and I had this as one of the games that's good because Max Brosmer returning to play against, his old team that he played against twice and went 1-1 against. And I do think that Rhode Island is going to be able to hang in this game close. Minnesota did not look great last week against UNC, lost on a game-losing field goal, rather. I think that Minnesota barely gets it and might pull away at the end, but I would not be surprised if this is like a 28-14 game or something like that. I don't think this is something that they're just going to run away with.
So you're taking URI and the under here.
I would say so. I think I could see them winning by 34-17, but I don't think the Minnesota is going to blow them out. And we could crucify me next week if they totally do. I just like the fact that the Rams have played Brosmer a couple times, and they played him well too, right? Beating him last season. So I do feel that they can keep this game closer than a lot of people might think, just because I don't really believe too much in Minnesota this year in general.
Yeah, no, I tend to agree with you, and I think a lot of it is going to be the potency of that running game, where you have a 4-headed monster that can take a game over at any point. But the other thing is Farrell is such a dynamic difference maker at quarterback. He can do so much with his legs. He can beat you with his arm, as he proved last week. He's the X factor here. I agree. I think if the number is 17, 17.5, 18, take URI here. As the road dog, I think that they could keep it closer than that. Could they lose by 14? Yeah, but I think that there's enough talent there that I think Jim Fleming's squad is going to come to play, and they're going to be competitive against Minnesota. Next up, we have UNH at Holy Cross. If there were a spread for this game, I would say that UNH is probably a 3.5-point favorite. How do you see this one playing out?
This is a tough one. I want to pick. I think I'm gonna pick the Wildcats here, just because of because I like them bringing what they bring back more. But I do think the rain could potentially be evening things out. So I'm gonna take the Wildcats, but I think it's gonna be close. I think it might be something like 17-14. I'd be surprised if it's a high scoring game. If it's a weather game, right? But I'm gonna take the Wildcats if I had to take them outright. But I really don't know. This feels like kind of a coin flip.
It really does. And again, I'm afraid we're gonna sell Holy Cross short
right
early in the year here, and we're forgetting that they still bring back Jordan Fuller, Justin Shorter, Joe Pizanski has played before. They showed a lot of gusto there in the second half of that game against URI last week. I think that this is a tight game. I think it's a low-scoring game that's going to go back and forth. But I'm going with the Crusaders at home. I know that UNH has Ruiz and Silver, and those guys can present some problems off the edge. Toscano at linebacker. They have a good secondary. They added Wandy Owens from Yale this offseason as a grad transfer. But I have my questions about this offense, Ryan. I mean, I like Seth Morgan. I like their backs. You mentioned Logan Tomlinson earlier. But they need to get on the same page here, and I don't think they're there yet. I think Holy Cross is a little further along there. I like Holy Cross in that matchup on Saturday. All right, next up we have Merrimack, who almost beat Air Force, lost 21-6. If they played a cleaner game, might have pulled off the upset. They will take on UConn down at the Rent. If we were putting a number on this, I'd probably have UConn as a 14-point favorite. How do you see this game playing out?
Yeah, I think they'll hit that. I think that the Huskies can. I mean, UMass did last season against a fairly similar Warrior program, so that's why I do believe in UConn to be able to cover that. But just to give a shout out to Merrimack, they were probably the best New England team this weekend outside of Maine and BC. Especially Malachi Anthony, 14 to 21, in a touchdown. I think that's impressive. And there were times where he didn't throw the whole ball a whole lot last year. So I think this could be close. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if it was, 14-10 UConn going into halftime, but I do think that they will pull away and cover that.
I think it will be close, and I think UConn will win, and I could see them winning by 10 to 14 points. But I think, like last week, I do think that this Merrimack football team is going to push them, and they're going to give them a game. And look, I think Coach G's done a great job with that defense there. He has for almost 20 years now at Merrimack. He gets those guys to play hard. I think that Merrimack does a great job in the portal. They do a great job in recruiting, so they have the talent that they need to be competitive. I think this is a game where they can be competitive. You mentioned that UMass game last year. That game was relatively competitive. It wasn't UMass pulled away, but Merrimack hung around for 2.5 quarters. So I could see a similar scenario playing out here. All right, UMass at Toledo. Big game for the Minutemen. You don't want to go to 0-2 to start the season, but it's going to be a tall order to go out there and win at the Glass Bowl.
Yeah, Toledo is the standard of the MAC. They're just consistent. I mean, Jason Candle's a great coach. The way they're able to plug and play. I mean, Penny Boone is not there. DeQuan Finn is not there, but I still think they have a lot of talent. They have two of the best safety combinations in the league. They're just okay against a run, so I'd love to see Jalen John get a little bit more involved. He had a pretty solid game last week, I felt, as a positive for UMass. But I definitely think Toledo wins, and I think they cover whatever it is. In my preview that I worked on this week, which should be coming out soon, Toledo has scored 40 or more points the last 3 times they've played the Minutemen the last few years. It's hard for me not to see them doing that again. So I'm going to go Toledo, and whatever the cover is, I'll take it just because I'm just feeling down after last week, right? I need them to – they need to show me something to kind of get that hope back, because right now I'm back to where I was before. So,
yeah. No, and hope is, like Napoleon said, a leader is a dealer in hope.
Yeah,
I think that Don Brown has to keep the faith, and I think that they need to keep the faith because they go out there and play well. They could win this game. It's not an impossibility, but it's tough. They're going to have to play a lot cleaner than they did this week against Eastern Michigan. All right, continuing our trip around the Division I landscape in New England for Week 2. We're picking the games here on the College Football Preview Show. Stonehill kicks off their season down at Stony Brook. Stony Brook coming off a tough loss to Marshall. If I were to put a number on this one, I'd probably say Stony Brook by 3.5, but Stonehill is more than capable of going down there and winning this one.
Yeah, this is an intriguing matchup because I think that, Stonehill showed a lot more than we thought last season. Stony Brook has been probably one of the, not to sound too harsh, one of the worst programs in the FCS in the last few years and has really struggled. So I do think that they might have more overall talent just simply being in the CAA and the type of players that they might be able to bring in there. But I'm going to pick the Skyhawks because, in my opinion, why not? They showed improvement last year. They were able to hang in some games that people didn't think they could. So I'm going to go with the Skyhawks here.
I think Stonehill's an intriguing team to watch. I really like what they have coming back in their backfield with Asher Karaha at quarterback and Xavier Woodward at running back, Jarrell Washington. Offensive line has some good experience back. You got Meslin and Tinkham back up front along that offensive line. The big question mark, of course, is going to be, what does Stonehill do on the perimeter? Do they have enough playmakers on the outside where they can get the ball to those guys and let them make plays? I'd keep an eye on tight end Cody Ruff. I think he's going to be a big part of their passing game. And I think that the former Thornton Academy graduate out of Maine could be a household name this season. I think he's going to be one of their primary targets. But I'm with you. I think Stonehill can go down there and get it done. I think Coach Gardner, I should say, will have the guys ready. I think they do go down there and get it done. Sacred Heart hosts St. A's. I mean, if we had to put a number on this one, I'd probably say that Sacred Heart is favored by at least 9.5, probably more like 14. But coming off a tough 17-15 loss at Delaware State, but I see the Pios bouncing back in this one against Division II St. A's.
Yeah, I think this is a good spot for them to be. They need to win like this. I think they need to beat up on them and just for some just to show, because there's good players in this team, and they just need to be like, hey, we can play. We can hang with teams. I mean, it's not like they got blown out. You know, it was a close game, but yeah, definitely going with the Pios here, and I'm taking them. You know, it's a 2-point loss, right? And they were hanging in the end. You know, so you know, they just got to be more consistent throwing the ball, and that's something they've struggled with the last 2 years.
Central Connecticut State comes home for their home opener against Fordham out of the Patriot League. Fordham has been one of the better programs in the league in recent years, and I would think that this will be a pretty good test for the Blue Devils.
Yeah, they're Fordham's, you know, one of the top 2 teams in the Patriot League.
And by the way, if we were doing a spread on this, I would probably say it's even. I mean, I think that this game's probably either even or -1 either way.
Okay. Yeah, I love that it's under the lights. I love that it's like a late game, and this was one of my, I think this was on the dessert portion of the best games of this weekend coming up, because I think that it's just a cool matchup. Central Connecticut State challenging themselves and bringing a team like Fordham, up the road is going to be fun. I'm going to take Fordham just because I think they have more overall talent, but I'm excited to see what they do. He started okay last week, and, I wouldn't be surprised if the Blue Devils win, but I'm going to take Fordham.
And of course, Bryant is going to be coming back home for their home opener at 4 p.m. on Saturday. They're at home taking on Division II Franklin Pierce. Bulldogs coming off a tough 48-17 loss to Delaware, but something tells me, Ryan, that this will be a nice bounce back game for Chris Merritt's squad. I'd have them favored by 10.5 in this one. I think they win by more than that, but I think that they take care of business against Franklin Pierce.
Yeah, I could see them winning by, 3 touchdowns, honestly. So I'm going to go with Bryant, kind of similar to Sacred Heart. Show we can play this game. So,
yeah, and I'm curious to see more of Jared Guest. I think as he gets more comfortable in this system, he could potentially end up being one of the better quarterbacks in the region. So he'll certainly be a player to keep an eye there at Bryant. And then finally, of course, we wrap it up with some of the Ivy Leagues haven't started yet. They don't play until the 21st of September. Brown opens up at Georgetown. You have Yale that weekend that's opening up. I'd have to look and see who they're opening up against. Harvard is opening up against Stetson. So the Ivy Leagues don't commence here for another couple of weeks. But certainly when you look at where we're at right now with the other programs in the region, we got plenty of football this weekend.
Yeah, and we'll see how the weather goes, but I'm just, still excited no matter how the outcomes went last weekend for football to be back. And for better or for worse, the Patriots are back Sunday. So if you're not looking forward to that, enjoy the hell out of Saturday. That's how I see it.
Yeah, and we, of course, be remiss if we didn't talk about Maine. They travel out to take on Montana State. As I mentioned earlier, Montana State, of course, is an FCS power. Black Bears coming off a 17-14 win over Colgate. If you had to put a line on this one, I probably would say that Montana State would probably be favored by 14 or more. Can Maine go out there and be competitive? We saw them hang for about a quarter last year at North Dakota State, but then the game got away from them. Can they go out to Montana State and be competitive?
I certainly think they can for a little bit. I think they'll definitely be able to hang for a bit, but I don't think they'll be able to win. But like we were saying earlier, if they can keep this game semi-close in the first half, and I think that that's a huge win. And I know there's no moral, victories in a loss, but keep it semi-close, and you can be like, no, we're working our way back here. So I'm going to take Montana State, but I don't think it's going to be a complete blowout right from the get-go.
Yeah. No, I don't think so either. I think Maine will hang in there. They'll play him tough, but I think in the end, when it comes down to is Montana State, I think has a little bit more talent, and I think that proves to be the difference. And as far as covering, yeah, I think the Montana State will cover. So there you go. All right, Ryan, any final thoughts here before we wrap it up on week 2 of the college football season in New England?
Other than being frozen here and apologizing for that ugly photo, I'm Excited for UNH Holy Cross. I can't wait. That to me is probably going to be the game of the weekend, arguably. So,
well, it will be. I agree with you. I think when you look at the New England slate
the
for
New England
D1
slate.
matchups, I agree. I think that'll be the game of the weekend. I think it's going to be a great game. And as you mentioned, it's going to be I think it probably will be a relatively low scoring game. So we'll see. I do want to let you know last night, Barry, in my first fantasy football draft, I had the 10th pick. Tonight, I have the 8th pick. At this point, if you're not going to get the number 1 pick, I want the 10th pick because then I get the back-to-back picks. Kind of annoying. The 8th pick is a tough spot, so
It is,
we'll see.
And it's easy to get bored and start looking at your phone, open another tab,
Right,
because
and
you
then
got so long in between.
Yeah, they auto pick somebody for you. So
Right.
that
So
sucks. Well, hey, great job as always. Of course, as I
well.
mentioned earlier, Ryan will be at that UNH Holy Cross game for us on Saturday. So looking forward to his coverage. And if you're a UNH and a Holy Cross fan, well, make sure you're following Ryan and you're following New England Football Journal for the best college football coverage in New England. We're not ashamed to say it. We think we do it better than anybody else when it comes to the D1 programs in New England. Make sure you follow along on all our social media platforms and check us out at anyfootballjournal.com. And as always, subscribe. If you haven't subscribed yet, $2.99 a month gets you the best football coverage in New England, top to bottom. It's a great deal if you love football. We're all football all the time. There is no off season. We're year round. So make sure you subscribe today and get access to some of the best football coverage in New England. All right, that'll do it for this week's episode of the College Football Preview Show. For Ryan Barry, I'm John Sarianides. Till next week, make sure you're safe, get out there and enjoy the games, and as always, peace.